How do you express your love? Some people give flowers. Some people choose diamonds. Others write poetry or make music. Well, if you were a pulp writer in the early days of sci-fi, perhaps you express your love with robots and spaceships. Writers who are couples are nothing new. But in the early days of sci-fi, two couples helped define the subgenre of space opera. To paraphrase the title of a sci-fi series on a certain streaming service, this could be the real Love and Robots. I'm VJ, this is The Hairy Edge, and let's dive into it. Catherine Lucille Moore was an American writer born in 1911. She began her writing career in the 1930s using the pen name C.L. Moore. She later said this was not an attempt to hide her gender, but to distance herself from her day job at a trust company. She became known for two recurring characters, Northwest Smith and Jarell of Drury, the latter a very early example of a female adventure character. Henry Kuttner was born in California in 1915. For a time, he worked in his uncle's literary agency. While there, he discovered the unsolicited manuscripts of a writer who he would connect with amazing stories. That writer was Leigh Brackett. She would become famous in her own right and would, also famously, be married to another sci-fi author. But that is just a tease for something that will come later, in this video. I promise. Kuttner began his writing journey in the 1930s, publishing in Weird Tales magazine. He created a couple of recurring characters that spanned several genres. In sci-fi, there was Gallagher. In Sword and Sorcery, we had Elak of Atlantis. In the realm of adventure, Thunder Jim Wade. Like many pulp sci-fi authors of that time, he also wrote comic books, notably the first Green Lantern character, Alan Scott, between 1944 and 1948. Kuttner had seen the work of C.L. Moore and wrote to the author, not realizing that the C in C.L. stood for Catherine. Well, that seems to have been a happy accident. Kuttner and Moore became partners in more than one way, co-authoring the story Quest of the Starstone in 1937. They married in 1940 and continued to write together. They employed several pen names, including C.H. Liddell, Lawrence O'Donnell, and Louis Paget. Under the Paget name, they wrote the story Mimsy Were the Borogoves, which has become a classic of sci-fi humor. Besides using pen names, the couple had mutual input in the stories published under their own names. How much influence they had on each other's work is not clearly established, but it's speculated they may have co-written some of these stories. Kuttner died in 1958. Moore would never write fiction prose after that. She wrote for television, including episodes of Maverick and 77 Sunset Strip. Moore stopped writing altogether in 1963 and passed away in 1987. Was this the death in the Love, Death, and Robots? Or was it just an evolutionary change of publishing and fiction tastes, a mystery for a pulp detective much more skilled than I? If you were paying attention, we have already established connection between our first space opera power couple and the next. Well, were you paying attention? It was Henry Kuttner who helped kickstart the publishing career of Leigh Brackett. Brackett, often called the Queen of Space Opera, is an author I've examined in previous videos. Another author of the pulp era, she wrote in a variety of genres, but is mostly remembered today for her sci-fi work, including the creation of her character, Eric John Stark. She is also remembered for her screenwriting, including some well-known westerns and the movies The Big Sleep and The Empire Strikes Back. At the same time Brackett was honing her craft in magazines like Planet Stories and Astounding, Edmund Hamilton was also plying his trade as a pulp writer. Hamilton published his first story in Weird Tales magazine in 1926. In the 1940s, Hamilton was one of several authors behind the creation of uber space opera hero Captain Future. The Captain Future stories were very much in the pulp tradition, square-jawed and lethal, with little in the way of nuance. Like Kuttner, Hamilton did indeed work in comic books, penning issues of Batman and Superman, and is credited for creating the character of Batwoman. Over time, Hamilton's stories evolved to include more humanistic elements, and that evolution is often credited to Leigh Brackett. The two met in the 1940s but became separated by the war. but Captain Future's robot Craig would not be denied his love. Hamilton and Brackett married in 1946 in a ceremony attended by Ray Bradbury. Unlike Kuttner and Moore, the Hamiltons were not known to collaborate. 25 years after their marriage, the Mom and Papa space opera finally worked on their only known collaboration. The story Stark and the Star Kings was written to appear in Harlan Ellison's anthology The Last Dangerous Visions in the 1970s. Ellison died in 2018 and the book was never published. Stark and the Star Kings did eventually see publication, but it was after the death of both its authors. Hamilton passed away in 1977 and Brackett 1 year later. Their collab was not officially published until 2024. Before his death, though, Hamilton was interviewed about the creation of the Star King story. The collab seemed to be somewhat contentious, and it's not surprising that their work together was short-lived. These four writers on their own were incredibly important in the development of sci-fi as a genre and space opera in particular. It's kind of mind-boggling to me how closely interwoven they actually were. These really were the power couples of space opera. One may think that rockets are propelled by chemistry, but perhaps, at one time at least, they were powered by love.